Hey folks, I'd like to talk today about stress and pain, actually. I recently had the opportunity to sit down with a colleague of mine and talk to her about the concept of stress versus pain. It was a question that was recently posted in one of the forums. Are stress and pain the same? And I mean, superficially speaking, you would say, hell no, they're not. But the reason that this was posed wasn't in the superficial, are they the same, but in the kind of neurological, are they the same? You see, stress is an output, as is pain. Your nervous system is generating these signals, is generating these sensations, is generating these outputs. So stress isn't something you have done to you. A stressor is done to you. A stressor is something that could theoretically induce a stress output from your nervous system, from your hormones, from your physiology to say, okay, fight or flight mode, change respiratory rate, prep for action or danger, things like that, and that's your stress response. The stress is the output from your endocrine and nervous system. Pain is not dissimilar. Pain is what we call a biopsychosocial phenomenon, and that's getting bandied around a lot in kind of contemporary approach to massage therapy. And the reason is because it's about damn time. We have been treating pain as a physical input for years and years longer than we should have been. When we're talking about things like stress, when we're talking about things like pain, what's happened here is the nervous system has interpreted data, and that's data, so that's inputting little bits, and then it's projected outwards information. So I get stabbed in the arm. I'm going to have a stress response. I'm going to have, most likely, a pain response. What happened is my nervous system takes the data that came in, the pressure receptors stimulated, the stretch receptors stimulated, the nociceptors stimulated, and it puts that together and takes all those little data points and says, here's the information I can give you on that. I believe you've been stabbed, also ouch. Also, you should do something about that. You've been bloody stabbed! And so your stress response goes up, your pain response goes up. These are all outputs. And they can affect each other. If you are experiencing more stressors in your day-to-day life, and you are starting to come to a threshold of stress output, if you are starting to feel stressed, if you're starting to feel that physiological experience where you say, I'm having trouble sleeping, my diet is affected, my hobbies aren't as fun anymore, I can't get my mind off of this, etc., etc., etc. That is neurological output and endocrine output. And you are experiencing the effects of those stressors. Well, that stress can, in effect, also change your pain tolerance. It is now changing how likely you are to perceive pain in one of two ways, depending on the stressors and the response in stress. It can up your sensitivity, or it can drop your sensitivity, depending on your stress response. If you're in fight or flight mode, then you might actually have less pain sensitivity in that moment. If you're in chronic stress response, you might find yourself much more pain sensitive, however. And so, in some ways, they are actually very similar. It's not to say they are the same in absolute effect, but in continuum, they're very similar. They can affect each other. You being in pain, your pain that you are experiencing is a stressor and can cause more stress. Especially if that pain comes with question marks like, I don't know, what is this growth? That shouldn't be pointing that way. I heard a loud crack and now I hurt. I don't know what happened, but I know something's wrong. I have question marks associated with this. Someone saying, oh, okay, that's a shattered bone. That loud crack you heard was a bone just exploding in your body. Oh my God, you're going to be crippled. Pain goes up. That pop that you heard was a large joint cavitating. It was just an innocuous nitrogen gas expansion and collapse. And it just would pop really loudly. Your pain can go down when you're reassured, because you've now changed the nature of those question mark stressors. So I hope that sheds a little bit of a light on this subject. I know it's kind of coming out of left field relative to the stuff I normally post and talk about, more injuries and rehab stuff, and this is a bit more kind of the clinical biopsychosocial stuff, but it is incredibly valid. We have to recognize that we can't just say this now affects this. We can't just say, oh, your stress can affect your pain, because they are actually peers to each other, if you will. Our sense of ourselves, the continuum that we experience as ourselves, if it is threatened or if it is challenged in some way, we can have an output in response to that. Pain is one of those things. Stress is another one of those things. Happiness is one of those things. Satisfaction is another one of those things. If someone challenges you on something that you feel comfortable about and you respond in a confident manner and you feel better, you were challenged, you were technically stressed by them doing it. There was a stressor introduced, and your response to that stressor was then to respond out of confidence. That stress that you output is not a negative stress anymore. It's a stressor that you experienced and overcame. Satisfaction. And so all of these things that we talk about experiencing, they tend to be outputs. And in that light, then yes, stress and pain are incredibly similar. And we need to consider those outputs relative to the inputs that can lead to them in our treatment plans. I know we are clinically speaking myoskeletal practitioners, but we cannot ignore the psychosocial part of a negative or positive experience. We have to be aware that our physical treatment does have impact on those things, and those things can impact the efficacy of our physical treatment. I'm not saying we all become psychologists. I am, however, saying please be aware that these distinctions matter, and that the way a person is educated, is spoken to. I know that sounds probably pedantic to a lot of you, and I'm very sorry if any of you are like shaking your head like, why is he explaining this simple point? To some of us, it's not that simple a point. To me, until even just a few years ago, that was something I didn't really get. And so it's worth taking that into account. It's worth realizing that our clinical approach, our humanism, is a huge part of our clinical efficacy. And our understanding that these stressors and challenges to sense of self, to that continuum of self, are incredibly valid in our treatment and assessment approach. So thanks very much. I hope that clears up some questions. If you have any more questions, feel free to message me, or I don't know, call me or pester me in some way. I'll be happy to go over it. Thank you.